The Empire State Building stood tall against the night sky, its lights shimmering like stars. Inside, the gala buzzed with laughter and music, a playground for the rich and powerful. Alaric Sterling, the arrogant heir, moved through the crowd with an air of entitlement. His perfectly tailored suit clung to his frame, and his confident stride drew the attention of those around him. Sycophants surrounded him, eager to feed his ego with compliments and flattery. They laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones, and hung on his every word. But behind the confident facade, Alaric felt a strange emptiness gnawing at him. As he sipped his drink, his gaze fell on Samuel Carter, the stoic security guard stationed near the entrance. Samuel stood tall, arms crossed, a quiet strength emanating from him. Alaric felt an irritation rise within him. Here was someone who refused to bow to the glittering world of wealth and privilege. Alaric approached, a smirk on his face. "You know, it must be tough standing around all night, guarding the entrance to this glamorous world," he taunted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Samuel looked up, meeting Alaric's gaze without flinching. "I have a job to do," he replied calmly, "and I'm good at it." The tension between them crackled like electricity. Alaric leaned in closer, trying to intimidate him. "Good? Really? You're just a security guard. You don't belong in a place like this." Samuel straightened his posture, unfazed. "And you think being born into wealth gives you any real power? Respect isn't bought, Alaric." Alaric felt an unexpected jolt at Samuel's words. He had always used his status to command respect, but here was someone who stood his ground. It was a challenge that made Alaric's heart race. He opened his mouth to retort, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he looked away, troubled by his own reaction. Inside, a storm brewed. Alaric felt a flicker of doubt. Samuel's calm demeanor pierced through the armor of arrogance he wore. How could this man, who held no wealth or power, make him feel so small? Alaric glanced around at the people laughing and dancing, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his isolation. Surrounded by so many, he was utterly alone. "Do you even know what it means to be truly respected?" Samuel's voice cut through the noise. The question lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Alaric stared at Samuel, his mind racing. He had always thought respect came with money and status, but here was evidence to the contrary. Samuel's unwavering gaze held a mirror to Alaric's soul, reflecting the emptiness that lay beneath his surface. Suddenly, the laughter and music felt distant, almost like a dream, fading away. Alaric's thoughts spiraled. He remembered his childhood, where love was scarce and financial success was all that mattered. He had been raised to believe that wealth equated to happiness, yet standing here now, he felt anything but happy. "What's wrong, Alaric?" Samuel asked, his voice steady. "Afraid to look in the mirror?" The words struck a chord, and Alaric felt anger rising within him, but it was accompanied by something else. Fear. Fear of what he might find if he truly looked. He turned away, trying to shake off the feeling. "I don't need to justify myself to you," he snapped, but the words felt hollow. As the night wore on, Alaric stood at the edge of the gala, gazing out at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars, but they brought him no comfort. He felt the weight of his upbringing pressing down on him, and for the first time, he questioned everything he believed. Samuel's voice echoed in his mind, the question haunting him. Did he truly understand respect? In that moment, surrounded by the glitter of wealth, Alaric realized that he was just as lost as those he had belittled. The gala continued around him, but he felt a shift within, a crack in the armor he had built around himself. Perhaps this night would change him in ways he never expected. As the gala continued, Alaric Sterling stood by the grand window of the Empire State Building, looking out at the city lights below. The glimmering skyline sparkled like a sea of diamonds, yet he felt no joy in its beauty. He remembered his childhood in a world filled with wealth, but not love. Flashbacks flooded his mind, each one heavier than the last. In his memories, Alaric saw his parents, always busy with work, never having time for him. They celebrated his achievements with expensive gifts, but never with kind words or hugs. "You need to make money, Alaric," his father would say. "No one respects those who cannot provide." Those words echoed in his mind, shaping his understanding of success. Alaric had learned to equate love with financial success, but now, standing alone amid a crowd, he felt an emptiness that wealth could not fill. Meanwhile, Samuel Carter, the stoic security guard, was also lost in thought. He remembered his own upbringing, far from the luxury Alaric enjoyed. Samuel had worked hard for every dollar, and every sacrifice had been for his daughter, who battled a chronic illness. He recalled her laughter, a sound that lit up their small apartment. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" she would ask, her eyes sparkled with hope. Those moments were the treasures Samuel cherished, and they reminded him of what truly mattered. The contrast between their lives was stark. Alaric had everything material, but felt isolated, while Samuel had little but was rich in love and connection. Alaric turned away from the window, scanning the crowd around him. Guests laughed and danced, but their voices felt distant, as if muffled by glass. He wondered if anyone in that room would truly miss him if he vanished. Just then, Samuel approached him, his expression serious. "Alaric," he began, "do you know what it means to be truly respected?" The question hung in the air, charged with meaning. Alaric's heart raced. No one had dared to confront him like that before. It was a challenge, and it pierced through his carefully constructed armor. "What do you mean by that?" Alaric replied, feigning confidence. He could feel the weight of Samuel's gaze, steady and unwavering. "I mean, respect isn't about money or status," Samuel said, his voice calm. "It's about being genuine. It's about caring for others." Alaric felt a flicker of discomfort at Samuel's words. It was a truth he had long avoided. He shifted his weight, feeling the pressure of the moment. Deep down, he knew Samuel was right. He had spent so long building walls around him that he had forgotten how to connect with people. As Samuel walked away, Alaric's mind raced. The question echoed in his thoughts, stirring emotions he had long buried. What did it mean to be respected? He thought about the times he had belittled others, using his wealth to intimidate. Had he ever gained real respect or just fear? The realization sank in, heavy and unsettling. Feeling overwhelmed, Alaric stepped outside onto the balcony for some fresh air. The cool breeze brushed against his skin, and he looked up at the stars, feeling small and insignificant. In that moment, he understood that his wealth had built a fortress around him, isolating him from true connection. He thought of Samuel again, standing firm, unafraid of the powerful air. There was strength in that calmness, and Alaric felt a stirring desire to change. He wanted to know what it felt like to be respected, to earn it through kindness and understanding, rather than fear and intimidation. As the night wore on, Alaric realized he had a choice to make. He could continue down the path of arrogance or take a step toward humility and connection. The weight of his wealth felt heavier than ever as he considered the emptiness it had brought him. With a newfound sense of determination, Alaric resolved to seek a different path. Perhaps, he thought, the journey toward respect and connection could begin with one small act of courage. As the night wore on, Alaric Sterling found himself standing alone near the edge of the rooftop of the Empire State Building. The bright lights of the city sprawled below him, twinkling like stars fallen to earth. Despite the lively atmosphere and the crowd that surrounded him, he felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. He watched as laughter and joy filled the air, but for him, it was a distant sound, like music from another world. Samuel Carter, the steadfast security guard, stood a bit farther away, observing the scene. His thoughts drifted to his daughter, whose laughter echoed in his mind. He remembered the way she would light up the room with her smile, a reminder of the sacrifices he made for her. Each moment spent working long hours felt heavy on his heart, but her happiness made it worthwhile. Alaric turned his gaze from the city and looked at Samuel. There was something in the guard's eyes, strength and resilience, that made him pause. For the first time that night, Alaric felt a flicker of vulnerability. "You know," he began, breaking the silence, "I always thought money could buy everything." Samuel regarded him silently, his expression unreadable. "It can buy a lot," he replied slowly, "but it can't buy respect or genuine friendship." Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Alaric's chest tightened as he processed Samuel's response. He had always believed that power and wealth were the ultimate goals, but now, standing beside Samuel, he started to question everything he had known. "Do you ever feel alone?" Alaric finally asked, searching for understanding in Samuel's eyes. "Every day," Samuel admitted, his voice low. "But I have my daughter. She keeps me grounded. What do you have?" The question struck Alaric like a bolt of lightning. He opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. He had friends, yes, but they were more like shadows, people who surrounded him for his money and status. He realized, with a pang of sadness, that he had no one who truly cared for him. "I have things," Alaric said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "But they don't fill the emptiness." Samuel nodded, understanding the weight of Alaric's admission. "It's not too late to change that," he offered gently. "You can find real connections if you let down your walls." Alaric looked down at the bustling streets below, where people lived their lives, connected to one another in ways he had never experienced. The thought of breaking down his barriers filled him with both fear and hope. "But how?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Start by being honest," Samuel suggested. "Show people who you really are, not just the image you present." As the night deepened, Alaric felt a shift within himself. The walls he had built around his heart began to crack. He glanced at Samuel, who stood steady like a lighthouse in a storm. "I've spent so long trying to be someone important," Alaric confessed. "I never realized it was all just a facade." Samuel's eyes softened. "It takes courage to admit that. Most people would rather hide behind their masks." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotions and realizations. Alaric felt the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him, but there was a glimmer of hope as well. "Maybe I can learn to be someone better," he said, determination creeping into his voice. "Maybe you can," Samuel replied, a hint of encouragement in his tone. "It's a journey, not a destination." As they stood there, the sounds of the gala faded into the background. Alaric felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He had spent so much time chasing after wealth and status, but now he understood that true power lay in connection, respect, and vulnerability. With a newfound resolve, Alaric took a deep breath, ready to embrace the changes ahead. The night was still young, and for the first time, he felt hopeful about the future. As the gala continued around him, Alaric Sterling stood alone, lost in thought. The glittering lights of the Empire State Building seemed to fade into the background as he grappled with his identity. He had always been known for his wealth and power, but tonight, those things felt hollow. The laughter and chatter of the crowd felt distant, as if they were from another world. Alaric could not shake the feeling that something was missing, something deep within him. He remembered the times he had humiliated others to assert his dominance. Faces flashed in his mind, people he had belittled, moments when he had reveled in the fear he created. The realization hit him hard. "What kind of man have I become?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the music. Alaric felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had perpetuated a cycle of abuse and fear, and it was time to confront that. Across the room, Samuel Carter watched Alaric with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The stoic security guard had seen many sides of the wealthy heir, but tonight felt different. Samuel could sense the internal struggle within Alaric, and it intrigued him. He approached cautiously, knowing the history between them. "Are you all right, Alaric?" he asked, his tone steady. Alaric looked up, surprised. "Do I look all right?" he snapped, but the anger in his voice lacked its usual edge. Samuel did not flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence calm and unwavering. "You look lost," Samuel replied, his voice low. It happens to the best of us. Alaric's defenses began to crumble. I've hurt people, Samuel. I've been a terrible person, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign on his tongue, but they were true. Samuel regarded him with a mix of surprise and skepticism. You're just realizing that now? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Alaric felt stung by the question, but deep down, he knew Samuel was right. It's easier to ignore the truth when you're surrounded by yes men, Alaric confessed, his eyes searching Samuel's face for understanding. I have everything I could ever want, but I feel empty. A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Samuel took a deep breath, weighing his response. It takes courage to admit that. Most people cling to their power and refuse to see beyond it. Alaric nodded, his mind racing. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to hurt people just to feel powerful. I want to change. Samuel studied Alaric, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Change doesn't come easy. It requires more than just words. It requires action. I know, Alaric replied, his voice firming. I want to apologize. I want to make things right with you. Samuel's gaze softened slightly. Apologizing is a good first step, but it's just the beginning. Taking a deep breath, Alaric stepped forward, his heart pounding. Samuel, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I've disrespected you, and I see that now. You deserve better. The weight of his words hung in the air, a turning point in their relationship. Samuel met Alaric's eyes, searching for any trace of insincerity, but what he found was a flicker of vulnerability. Thank you for saying that, he finally replied, his tone more forgiving. It's not easy to admit when you're wrong. Alaric felt a wave of relief wash over him. I know I have a long way to go, but I want to understand your life, your struggles. I want to help, if you'll let me. Samuel considered Alaric's offer. It won't be easy. You'll have to face the consequences of your past actions. I'm ready, Alaric said, determination settling in his chest. As they stood together in the bustling gala, the realization of a new beginning started to dawn on Alaric. He took a step back, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The night was still alive with music and laughter, but for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose. Alaric Sterling was ready to change, and in that moment, he understood that true strength lay not in dominance, but in humility and connection. After the unexpected apology, a subtle shift occurred within Alaric Sterling. He realized that his journey toward understanding and connection had just begun. He stood by the large windows of his penthouse, looking out at the city that had always felt so lonely. The bright lights twinkled below, but for the first time, they did not seem inviting. Instead, they reminded him of the emptiness he felt inside. In the days that followed, Alaric made a conscious effort to reach out to Samuel Carter. He wanted to understand the man he had once tried to intimidate. One afternoon, Alaric found himself at the small cafe where Samuel often took breaks. He spotted Samuel sitting alone at a table, his brow furrowed as he stared at his phone. Mind if I join you? Alaric asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Samuel looked up, surprise crossing his face. He hesitated, then nodded. Sure, just don't expect me to be your friend right away. Alaric chuckled lightly, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. That's fair. I'm not here to rush anything. I just want to listen. Samuel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Alaric took a seat across from him, feeling the tension in the air. He decided to break the silence. I know I have a lot to make up for. I want to understand your life, your challenges. I can only imagine what it's like to be a father in your situation. Samuel sighed, his expression softening slightly. It's not easy. My daughter has been sick for a long time. I work 2 jobs just to pay the bills, and sometimes I don't know how I'll keep it up. Alaric felt a pang of empathy. I want to help. I know my money can't solve everything, but maybe I can assist with her medical bills or help you find better resources. Samuel leaned back, crossing his arms defensively. Why would you do that? You've never cared about anyone but yourself." "I'm trying to change," Alaric replied earnestly. "I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to make things right, starting with you." Samuel studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. After a long pause, he spoke. "If you really want to help, prove it. Be there for me and my daughter, not just with money, but with your time." Alaric nodded, feeling a sense of determination grow within him. "I can do that. I'd like to meet her." The next week, Alaric found himself at Samuel's modest apartment. The walls were decorated with posters of superheroes, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of cookies baking in the oven. Samuel's daughter, Lily, was a bubbly girl with bright eyes that sparkled with curiosity. "Daddy, who is that?" she asked, pointing at Alaric. "This is Mr. Sterling, Lily," Samuel introduced, his tone cautious. "He wants to help us." "Help us with what?" Lily asked, her innocence shining through. Alaric knelt to her level, a smile spreading across his face. "I want to make sure you have everything you need to feel better, and maybe we can have some fun together too." Lily giggled, her initial shyness fading. "Like what? Can we play games?" "Absolutely. I love games," Alaric replied, feeling a warmth in his heart. He had never imagined himself in such a role, but it felt good. As they spent the afternoon together, playing board games and sharing laughter, Alaric began to understand the joy of connection. Samuel watched with a mixture of skepticism and hope. Could this really be the same man who had once belittled him? Days turned into weeks, and Alaric continued to show up, bringing small gifts and treats for Lily. He helped Samuel navigate the complicated medical system and even began to attend doctor appointments, sitting quietly in the waiting room, offering support. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Samuel finally spoke up. "You know, Alaric, I didn't expect you to stick around. I thought this was just a phase for you." Alaric looked at him, sincerity in his eyes. "It's not a phase. I'm learning what it means to truly connect with others. You and Lily mean more to me than I ever thought possible." Samuel nodded, a hint of a smile breaking through his guarded demeanor. "I appreciate that. Just remember, it's a long road ahead." "I'm ready for the journey," Alaric replied, feeling a sense of hope blossom within him. Together, they were forging a bond that neither had anticipated, one built on understanding, respect, and the possibility of friendship. As the sun rose over the bustling city, Alaric Sterling felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He stood in front of his grand office window, looking out at the streets below. The vibrant energy of New York City filled him with hope. The shadows of his past began to fade as he embraced his newfound perspective. "Today is the day," he whispered to himself, a smile forming on his lips. His thoughts turned to Samuel Carter, the stoic security guard who had become an unlikely friend. They had shared moments that challenged Alaric's views on wealth, respect, and connection. Now, they were ready to take a bold step together. Later that day, Alaric met Samuel at a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Samuel sat at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup. When Alaric approached, Samuel looked up, his expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Good morning, Samuel," Alaric greeted, his voice warm. "I've been thinking about our conversation. I want to do something meaningful." Samuel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to organize a charity event," Alaric declared, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Something that brings people together and helps those in need. I want to use my wealth for a purpose." Samuel leaned back in his chair, considering Alaric's words. "That's a big step. What kind of causes are you thinking about?" Alaric took a deep breath. "I want to focus on healthcare for children. I know how much you care for your daughter. I want to help families like yours." "That's admirable," Samuel replied, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "But it's not just about throwing money at problems. It's about building real connections with people." "I know," Alaric nodded, his expression serious. "That's why I want you by my side." You understand the struggles. You can help me connect with the community." Samuel studied Alaric for a moment, weighing his options. "All right, I'll help. But you need to be genuine. People can see through a facade." Alaric smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I promise, Samuel, this is about change, not just for me, but for everyone." As they began to plan the event, Alaric found himself deeply invested in the details. He reached out to local businesses for donations and spoke to families about their needs. Samuel guided him, sharing stories of the challenges they faced daily. Through these conversations, Alaric learned about resilience, hope, and the importance of community. Weeks passed, and the day of the charity event arrived. The venue was filled with decorations, lights twinkling above like stars. Alaric stood at the entrance, greeting the guests with a newfound humility. He felt nervous, but excited. This was not just another social gathering. It was a celebration of connection. As the event began, Samuel took the stage to speak. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady. "Tonight is about more than just raising money. It's about coming together as a community and supporting one another." Alaric stood in the crowd, feeling proud of Samuel. He watched as Samuel shared stories of families who had struggled but found strength in each other. The audience listened intently, and Alaric could see the impact of Samuel's words. Then, it was Alaric's turn. He stepped up to the microphone, his heart racing. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I've learned a lot from Samuel and the people I've met along this journey. Wealth is not just about money. It's about the connections we make and the lives we touch." The crowd erupted in applause, and Alaric felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that this was what he had been missing all along: genuine relationships and a sense of belonging. As the night continued, laughter and joy filled the room. Alaric and Samuel moved through the crowd, talking to guests and sharing stories. The atmosphere buzzed with happiness, a stark contrast to the loneliness Alaric had felt before. Later, as the event came to a close, Alaric stood outside, looking up at the stars. Samuel joined him, a content smile on his face. "You did well tonight," he said, clapping Alaric on the back. "Thank you, Samuel. I couldn't have done it without you," Alaric replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "This feels like the beginning of something important." "It is," Samuel nodded. "You're on the right path. Just remember, it's about the people." Alaric looked at Samuel, understanding the weight of those words. He realized that a true legacy is built on relationships and the impact one has on others, not just financial success. And with that revelation, he felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Share this story if you believe that genuine connections can change lives for the better. Leave a comment about a time when you made a meaningful impact in your community, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.